Hey there, I'm Carrie, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about The Telltale Heart, a short story by Edgar Allan Poe that was published in 1843. I'm going to do a short summary first, and then do some analysis, talk about symbolism, foreshadowing, the type of thing that you might see on a test or in an essay question. I've got timestamps in the video notes, so definitely scroll down, click around, and find exactly what it is you need. If you're looking for more specific information on Edgar Allan Poe himself, I've put that in a separate video, so I will link that in the video notes as well, so you can learn a little bit more about him. All right, let's get into The Telltale Heart. So this story is told in the first person, and the first thing that our narrator tells us is, "I'm not crazy." That is his whole motivation for telling his story. He's like, I'm not crazy, and I'm gonna prove to you just how not crazy I really am. My only problem is my hearing is too good. I can hear everything in heaven, on earth, and even in hell. And then he tells us exactly what happened. So the narrator, we never get his name. He lives with an older man. We also never get his name. And he tells us that he's got no problem with the old man. Said he wasn't mean to me. He didn't shout at me. I wasn't after his money. I love this guy. It's just that his eye really bugs me. So apparently the old man's got a weird eye, kind of a bluish, cloudy eye, and it really freaks the narrator out. He calls it the Vulture Eye, and it bothers him so much that he decides he needs to kill this old man in order to get rid of this weird eye that is freaking him out. So what happens? The narrator sneaks into the old man's room every night for a week. He takes a lantern with him and he pops the lantern, he sticks his head in the door, he pops the lantern open, and he looks at the old man. He watches the old man while he sleeps. However, the old man is asleep, his eyes are closed, the narrator can't see this weird freaky eye, and so he can't bring himself to do the deed. He can't actually kill the old man. On the 8th night, while he's going through this little ritual, he opens the door, sticks his head and his lantern in, pops his lantern open, but he makes a noise and the old man wakes up. Throws open his eyes. He can see the freaky eye in the lantern light. So for a second, nobody moves, and the narrator is kind of liking it. He can tell the old man is really scared. He thinks that he can hear his heart beating. He says it was a sound that a watch makes when it's enveloped in cotton. He could hear the old man's heart beating. It's getting louder and louder because he's frightened. And the narrator starts to panic. He's like, if I can hear his heart, then the neighbors can probably hear his heart, and I'm gonna get caught. So this is the last straw, and he attacks the old man. The old man manages to scream once before the narrator gets to him and smothers him with his bedclothes. The next thing he does is conceal the body, and this is gross, sorry. He does it by cutting the body into pieces and hiding it in the floorboards of the bedroom, the old man's bedroom. About this time, there's a knock on the door. The police have arrived. Turns out a neighbor heard the old man scream and called the police to come over. The narrator's feeling pretty confident and he brings the police right inside. He tells them like, oh, well, that was actually me that you heard screaming because I had a bad dream. The old man, he's not even here. He's like on a field trip out in the country and he's not even around, but hey, by all means, search the house if that would make you happy. And he takes them around the house. He takes the police right into the old man's bedroom where he's just committed this crime and offers them seats. Why don't you sit down and we'll chat right here in the old man's bedroom? While he's sitting and chatting to the police officers, the narrator starts to not feel so well. He starts to feel a little bit off and he starts to get like some ringing in his ears. Well, the ringing starts to get worse and worse, and all of a sudden, he realizes that it's not in his ears. He's actually hearing something. There is something making noise. And he realizes it's the sound that a watch makes when it's enveloped in cotton. That's how he describes it. So he starts talking louder to cover up this noise, and he starts talking with his hands, and he gets up and marches around the room, and he's practically shouting at this point. Meanwhile, the noise is getting louder and louder. Meanwhile, the police are still acting like they can't hear it, but the noise is getting louder and louder. And the narrator realizes they can hear it, they're just messing with me. So it gets louder and louder and louder. Finally, the narrator cannot take it anymore. Last line of the story. "Villains," I shrieked, "dissemble no more." Dissemble means like messing with me. Quit messing with my head. "Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here, it is the beating of his hideous heart." The end. So, what a cheerful little story, right? Let's do some analysis on Telltale Heart. So let's talk about the narrator first. We never get a name of him or the old man. I'm assuming that the narrator is a caretaker, a servant, caregiver of some sort, because he seems to live with the old man full time, and he never makes any reference to like a blood relative. Like he never uses the word cousin or relation or uncle or grandfather or anything like that. So I'm presuming this is an employee. I'm assuming it's a man. This is written in 1843. For a single woman to be living alone with a single man that she was not related to would not be considered appropriate for the society that this was published in. That would not have been okay. So that's why I am presuming this is a man talking. Let's also talk about the old man. He doesn't get any lines in this story, unfortunately. Now, the narrator claims to love this guy. He says, he was never mean to me. I didn't want his money. It was just the eye, this weird eye that freaks the narrator out so much. So what the narrator is probably describing is a cataract, which is an eye condition. It's very, very common. It's associated with age, where a film kind of forms over the eye. So it can give it kind of this cloudy appearance, this kind of light colored appearance. The narrator calls it the vulture eye. And okay, I did not think vultures had blue eyes. So I checked, and no, they do not. At least not the vultures that we have here in the US. But vultures do have this thing. It's really lots of birds have it, and a lot of reptiles have it. It's this extra membrane. It's kind of like an extra eyelid that slides over the eye, and it's like a shield. It's a defense thing for the eye. It protects them. And when that membrane is covering their eye, there is kind of a light, like a grayish, cloudy appearance on a vulture. And it is weird looking. Just Google the pictures. It's strange. But like I said, lots and lots of birds have this. Lots and lots of reptiles have it. But he does not call this the guy's, blue jay eye or his cardinal eye or his gecko eye. He calls it the vulture eye. So why does he fixate on a vulture? First of all, I think it's foreshadowing. Vultures are birds of prey, but specifically they are scavenger birds. They prefer to eat things that are already dead, usually roadkill. But very frequently in literature and in film and in fine art, whenever a scavenger bird, like a vulture or sometimes a crow or a raven, whenever those birds show up in the story, it's usually foreshadowing of disaster or death. People tend to think like, oh, the bird can tell that something bad is about to happen, that they're about to get a meal, and that's why the vultures or the ravens have arrived. It means something terrible is coming. So I think that we're safe to say that the narrator suffers from some pretty severe anxiety, and that may be why the old man's cataract bothers him so much. Reminds him of a vulture, makes him think that there's some kind of impending disaster, something bad is about to happen to him, and he just can't stand it. I also want to point out that we can't really trust what the narrator says. He tells us that he loves the old man. He's like, I had no problem with him. But then when he attacks them in his room, when the old man wakes up and there's this moment when they're watching each other and he can tell the old man is terrified, but he keeps drawing the process out. He likes that the old man is scared. He's enjoying that fear, and that is absolute cruelty. There is no kindness or love there. There's no mercy there. All right, now let's talk about this phantom sound that keeps bothering the narrator. The first time he hears it is right before he attacks the old man. He hears what he believes is the heartbeat. So look at how he describes it. The sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. So the enveloped in cotton part, that is foreshadowing, because that is how he is about to kill this old man. He's going to envelop him in cotton. He's going to smother him in his bed sheets. Later on, he says it again. He says it's the sound a watch makes. When he's talking to the police and he's hearing this. So he could have said a sound like a drum beat, or he could have said a sound like a dripping faucet, or a sound like footsteps or rain on the roof. There's a dozen different ways he could have described this, but he chose to say a sound a watch makes. So obviously a watch is associated with the passage of time, something that is inevitable. And a lot of people they get freaked out by the concept of time because it brings us closer and closer to the end of life. We already know the narrator is pretty freaked out about the concept of death because he associates this man's cataract with a vulture, something that symbolizes the coming of death. When he likens the heartbeat to the sound a watch makes, it's, inevitable that this man's heart keeps going. It's inescapable. What he's done is inescapable, and it's inevitable that he's going to get caught. A little bit more about the narrator's mindset. Now, apparently he says he's telling this story so that we will understand that he is sane. So in trying to prove himself sane, he proves himself guilty. And if everyone who thinks he proved himself sane, definitely raise your hand. I don't think we can diagnose what exactly is up with the narrator, but there are definitely elements of severe anxiety, obsessiveness, paranoia that are all present in this, but also a superiority complex. When he talks about his over acuteness of the senses, he says, my hearing is too good. The way he describes it is, I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. This is actually very similar to phrasing that is used in the Bible. One passage uses the phrase, all the power in heaven and on earth. There's another, the passage known as the Lord's Prayer, if you're familiar with it, says on earth as it is in heaven. So you can see how similar it is. By invoking these words that are used in the Bible to describe God, the narrator is elevating himself above other humans. He's like, I am more than just a mere human. Later on, he uses the words wise, sagacious, and cunning. I am so very smart. And then the little phrases that he uses throughout when he's, committing this horrible crime. He says, gaily, happily, he attacked the old man. With a light heart, he answers the door and brings the police in. Ha ha is the word he uses when he tells us that he used a tub to catch the blood. He's not showing any connection to the reality of the situation. Last thing, I do want to point out some similarities between Telltale Heart and some of Poe's other short stories. So close your ears if you don't want spoiler alert. This was published in 1843. A few months later, another story called The Black Cat was published. 3 years later, in 1846, another short story called The Cask of Amontillado was published. And these three especially have a lot of links to each other. Again, spoiler alert, shut your ears if you don't want to know. They are all told in first person. They're all murderers that are going to tell us in detail what they have done. And they all demonstrate that same belief in their superiority, belief that they cannot and should not be caught. There's a lot of similarities to Black Cat, especially. You'll notice when you read that one, the murderers get caught in the exact same way. So, what a cheerful little trio of stories we have here. All right, that's about all I've got on the Telltale Heart. I hope you found some of that helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe so you can know when the next story becomes available. If you had a different story or a different author that you're interested in, definitely drop that in the comments and I will see what I can do. And yeah, that's about all I've got. Best of luck to you, and I'll see you in the next chapter.